It was 2:47 a.m. When I jolted awake, heart hammering like a piston. Conv wine said someone or something had smashed through my front door. The sound was primal, a guttural roar that shook the walls, like a semi-truck had derailed and plowed straight into my living room. I flung the covers off, my bare feet slapping the hardwood, only to meet a chilling shock. Icy water, ankle deep, swirling around my toes. For a split second, I froze, brain scrambling to make sense of it. No burglar, no shattered glass, just a flood, raging inside my own house. I stumbled forward, pajamas sodden and clinging to my legs, muttering, "What in God's name is happening?" The roar wasn't letting up, it was growing, a relentless growl, echoing from below. Grabbing a flashlight from the nightstand, I sloshed downstairs, each step a cold, wet squish. The basement door loomed ahead, and when I yanked it open, I wasn't prepared for the sight. Water cascading through the walls like a biblical curse, turning my cozy retreat into a scene from a disaster flick. It wasn't a trick light, it was a torrent, a furious gush that mocked every notion of home security I'd ever had. I stood there, soaked and dumbfounded, watching my life's belongings bob like debris in a shipwreck. 10 minutes later, I traced the chaos to its source. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dark, revealing a river of runoff from the street above, channeled straight into my lower level. It wasn't random, it was deliberate, a surgical strike of negligence courtesy of the Evergreen Estates Homeowners Association. Their shiny new drainage enhancement project had turned my house into ground zero for every drop of stormwater they didn't want near their precious clubhouse. I could almost hear Poseidon laughing as the water surged, a personal vendetta from suburbia's pettiest gods. By sunrise, my basement was a swamp. The rug floated like a soggy raft. My prized vintage record player sparked and smoked, and a box of tax records drifted past like a paper flotilla. Upstairs, my German shepherd Max perched at the top of the stairs, staring down with a look that said, "You built this underwater kennel, not me." I waded through the wreckage, the stench of wet drywall and fried electronics stinging my nose, snapping photos with grim determination. This wasn't just a mess, it was evy denke. I called the HOA president, Linda Voss, at 8:03 a.m., voice steady despite the fury bubbling inside. Linda, a wiry woman with a perm that screamed 1985 and a penchant for passive-aggressive emails, picked up with her usual faux cheerful tone. "Oh, hi, Nathan. I heard you had a little water issue." "A little water issue?" I snapped, pacing my soggy kitchen. "My basement a lagoon, Linda. Your drainage project turned my house into a storm drain." She chuckled, a dry, grating sound that made my teeth clench. "Well, maybe you shouldn't have bought a house with a basement so close to the hill. The board approved that plan to protect the community garden. If your foundation can't handle it, that's not our problem." I gripped the phone tighter. "You rerouted runoff straight into my property. I've got photos, Linda. This isn't an act of God, it's an act of idiocy." Her tone sharpened. The contractors were licensed. The plan was vetted. If you got a complaint, file it with the grievance committee. Then she hung up, Leah vying me, staring at a dead line, water lapping at my ankles. That's when I smelled a slow, feral grin that Max tilted his head at. Linda didn't know it yet, but I had a secret weapon, an insurance policy forged in the fires of paranoia and fine print. Years ago, during a late-night chat with my agent, Rick, I tacked on a rider so obscure it sounded like a conspiracy theory, coverage for third-party negligence, including HOA screw-ups. Back then, it felt like overkill. Now, it was my Excalibur, and I was ready to swing. The adjuster in cargo pants. The plumber arrived at noon, a grizzled guy named Tony with a beard like steel wool and a no-nonsense squint. He waded into the basement, boots sloshing, and within 10 minutes confirmed my suspicions. "This ain't a pipe burst," he said, pointing at the walls where water still seeped through cracks. "Pressure's external street runoff, no question. Someone up top screwed you royally." He smirked. "Got an enemy on the city council?" "Worse," I said. "An HOA." Tony nodded, like that was the only explanation he needed. and handed me his card. Good luck, man. You're gonna need it. I called Rick next. He answered on the second ring, his voice crackling with the energy of a man who lived for chaos. Nathan, what's up? Don't tell me you finally totaled that old Mustang. No, Rick. My basement's underwater. HOA flooded it with their genius drainage plan. He whistled, long and low. Oh, buddy, you've got the golden ticket. That HOA clause we added? This is its moment. They're going to regret this more than you do. He paused, then added with glee, I'm sending you Vince. Vince? Vince Russo. Best adjuster I've got. He's a walking lawsuit in flip-flops. You'll love him. Vince showed up the next morning, and he was everything Rick promised and more. 6'2", sunburned to a crisp, wearing cargo pants, a faded Metallica t-shirt, and a GoPro strapped to his chest like he was about to storm a beach. He shook my hand with a grip that could crush walnuts, sniffed the air, and said, Yep, smells like liability. Let's make a MOVYE out of this mess. He moved like a man possessed, snapping photos, taking water samples, and muttering to himself as he traced the flow from the street curb to my foundation. No retaining wall, no diversion break amateurs, he grumbled, pointing at a makeshift trench that snaked through the yard like a scar. This isn't drainage work. This is a declaration of war with shovels. By afternoon, Vince had a dossier, elevation maps, runoff patterns, and a grainy video from his GoPro showing water gushing from the HOA's botch gutter straight in my house. No permits filed either, he said, grinning like a kid with a new toy. They didn't even pretend to follow code. Your HOA's toast. I leaned against the wall, still damp despite the industrial fans I'd rented. Linda's going to say it's my fault for HOA-ing a basement. Vince laughed, a barking sound that echoed off the soggy drywall. Let her try. I've got enough here to bury her in paperwork. And when the insurance lawyers get involved, they'll sue the HOA back to the Stone Age to recoup your payout. You're not just getting fixity-y, getting revenge. The Evergreen Estates HOA meeting was scheduled with 18 hours' notice, a classic tactic to keep attendance low and questions scarce. I showed up anyway, hair still faintly mildewy, carrying a folder of Vince's photos and a coffee mug that said, I survived the flood. The clubhouse was a sterile box of beige walls and fluorescent lights, reeking of stale coffee and sanctimony. At the head of the table sat Linda, flanked by her minions, Greg, the VP with a Jim Bro swagger and a perpetual smirk, and Marjorie, the treasurer who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else but was too timid to leave. Linda spotted me as I walked in, her lips curling into a smirk that could curdle milk. Nathan, she said, voice dripping with mock sympathy, I hope you're not here to make a scene. I sat down, folding my hands. No scene, Linda. Just facts. Your drainage project flooded my house. 87 grand in damages and counting. She waved a hand, dismissing me like a pesky fly. The minutes will reflect that the HOA isn't liable for natural weather events or poor property design. If you'd maintained your foundation. Cut the crap, I said, sliding Vince's photos across the table. Your contractors jackhammered the community gutter and sent runoff straight into my basement. No permits, no inspections. That's not WeatherThat's negligence. Greg leaned forward, flexing his biceps through his too-tight polo. The project was for the greater good. Protected the tennis courts from erosion. Erosion into my house. I shot back. You turn my basement into your spillway. Linda's eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed syrupy. If you've got an issue, take it up with our internal process. We don't bow to private insurance claims. I smiled, cold and sharp. Great. My insurance already approved the claim. You'll be hearing from their lawyers next week. Full damages plus interest. The room went still. Greg shifted uncomfortably. Marjorie stared at her notepad, and Linda's smirk flickered like a dying bulb. Before she could recover, the door swung open, and in strolled Vince, GoPro rolling, a thermos of what I hoped was coffee in hand. Evening, folks, he said, flashing his adjuster badge like a cop in a noir film. Just need to confirm a few details for the claim. Linda Voss, right? HOA president. Linda's face flushed a shade of red, I'd never seen outside a Crayola box. This is a private meeting. You can't just... Funny thing about HOA bylaws, Vince interrupted, pulling out a tablet. Open meetings are required unless it's disciplinary, and this ain't that. Number 72-hour notice. No violation filed. You're wide open. He tapped the screen, showing stills from his footage. Here's your crew breaking the curb. Here's the water hitting Nathan's house. Oh, and here's the part where you skip permits. City Code 7-19 says that's a no-no. Linda sputtered. We had no way of knowing. Got your signature on the work order, Vince said, sliding a paper across the table. Contractor even noted you nixed a second inspection. Bold move. Greg glared at Linda like she'd just set his gym membership on fire. Marjorie whispered, I told you we needed permits, but no one heard her over Linda's attempt to rally. We'll resolve this internally, she snapped. Nathan, let's be reasonable. Reasonable, I said, standing. My water heater floated. My couch is a raft. You laughed at me on the phone, Linda. You don't get to play nice now. See you in court. As I walked out, Vince trailing behind me, I heard Linda hiss something about harassment. I didn't care. The storm wasn't mine, Anna Maria, it was hers. Linda didn't waste time. 2 days later, a violation notice appeared on my door, unapproved exterior lighting. The porch light I'd had for 5 years was suddenly a crime. The next day, another. Excessive pet noise, claiming Max's occasional bark was a neighborhood nuisance. I didn't own wind chimes, but I half expected a citation for those too. It was petty, desperate, and personal paper war to break me. I called Rick. They're hitting me with fines now. He laughed, munching on what sounded like a taco. Classic HOA panic. They're drowning, so they're flailing. Vince's report is gold subrogations already in motion. This just makes their case worse. Subrogation? Insurance pays you, then sues them to get it back. With interest. Linda's about to learn what personal liability means. That night, I got an unexpected VY cider. Ellen, the HOA secretary, stood on my porch, clutching a manila envelope like it was a live grenade. She was a mousy woman in her 50s, always fading into the background at meetings, but tonight her eyes burned with something fierce. I can't keep quiet anymore, she said, voice trembling. Linda, ignore my warnings about the drainage. I got proof mails, notes, even a recording where she told the contractor to finish it quick, no questions. I and VY-Ted her in, and she spilled everything. Time-stamped messages showed Linda pushing the project despite red flags. One email read, budget's tight, skip the extra checks. No one noticed. The voicemail was the kicker. Linda's voice, sharp and dismissive, saying, get it done. We'll handle any whining later. This is dynamite, I said, handing her coffee. Why now? Ellen stared at the mug. You didn't back down. Everyone else just pays the fines or moves. I thought maybe this could stop her. I sent the files to Rick, who forwarded them to the insurance lawyers. By week's end, the claim was locked, due on $92,000 for damages, plus legal fees. The subrogation suit named Linda, Greg, and Marjorie as liable officers. The HOA was cracking, and the neighborhood felt it. I wasn't done. Linda's petty fines lit a fire I couldn't douse, so I called Mia Torres, the local reporter with a knack for exposing small-town scandals. She'd once busted a mayor for siphoning park funds using nothing but receipts and a hidden mic. I laid it all out. The flood, the photos, Ellen's EVY Denke, Vince's footage. She grinned like a shark smelling blood. Her piece, Submerged by Suburbia, When Your HOA Becomes the Villain, dropped online 2 days later. It went VY-RAL locally, racking up shares and comments from HOA VY Tims across the county. Same thing happened to my fine for a tree shadow, one read. Ours banned solar panels for aesthetics, said another. Linda became a lightning rod overnight. She fought back with a stunt so absurd, I almost admired it. The next morning, she stood in her backyard, garden hose spraying a pathetic puddle by her garage, filming herself for the local news. Board members are suffering too, she whined, gesturing at the flood. Max wandered into the shot, lapped at the puddle, and barked when her teenage daughter, off camera, turned the hose back on. Mia aired it unedited, and the internet roasted Linda alive. Meanwhile, the insurance payout hit my account full coverage, plus extras for mold remediation and upgrades. The lawyers filed the subrogation suit, seeking due law $120,000 from the HOA, citing negligence and unpermitted work. Neighbors started talking, sharing their own stories. A retired teacher slipped me photos of Linda berating contractors mid-project. She yelled, "Cut through the Reno, one checks that corner," he whispered. The tide was turning. The next HOA meeting was an ambush. Residents packed the clubhouse, furious and armed with EVY Denke. Linda tried to spin it. "We acted in the community's best interest," but booze drowned her out. Ellen stood up, voice shaking but clear, and read the emails aloud. A guy in the back yelled, "You flooded his house and lied about it." The room erupted. Under a little-known bylaw, the crowd voted to oust Linda, Greg, and Marjorie with a 78 fan-tram majority. Linda clutched her binder, face pale, as the cheers shook the walls. Greg slunk out, muttering about ungrateful neighbors. Marjorie just sighed and left. Post-fallout, Linda tried a last-ditch newsletter, a rambling screed about betrayal and insurance conspiracies. The interim board blocked it, but she printed copies anyway, stuffing mailboxes at dawn. A neighbor's Ring camera caught her muttering, "They'll regret this," and it hit the group chat by breakfast. She was a ghost of her former reign, haunting the streets with inkjet vengeance. The mediation sealed her fate. Vince's EVY dense maps, recordings, drone shots left her lawyer grasping at straws. The HOA had no funds left. Linda and her cronies were personally liable for the due, law $120,000. She sold her house a month later, fleeing to whispers of a new HOA rejection 2 towns over. Her garden hose fiasco had gone too viral to escape. My basements were born a waterproof haven with a bar dubbed the Deluge Den. Neighbors gather there now, swapping stories over beers, the flood a badge of honor. Ellen's a quiet hero, and Vince? He's a legend, sending me a postcard from a beach bar. Next round's on me. The HOA's new board, led by a no-nonsense nurse named Carla, runs on transparency. No more petty fines, just a neighborhood breathing free. I keep my policy handy, a waterproof reminder. When tyrants flood your life, you don't just rebuild, you rise. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this VY Deo with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next VY Deo.